Hi, everybody. Anyone who watches this anyway, and I know at least one person does, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. You can see my cats in the background. Uh, I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to talk about a book that I've been reading because I'm a big nerd, and part of my plans for the year was sort of thinking about and reading about happiness and kind of um, what different people have to say about it, and not really philosophers because old dead guys are kind of boring, but I had a book that when I first came up with this project I had in mind because it had meant a lot to me when I read it a few years ago, and I was really excited to revisit it. So this is The Happiness Myth, the historical antidote to what isn't working today by Jennifer Michael Hecht. It was published in 2007, so it is over 10 years old, and I read it probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So it certainly doesn't kind of dive into our current political state, but I found it, on rereading it, I found it that it had some pretty interesting ideas about kind of what makes for happiness and what doesn't necessarily make for happiness, like what leads us to unhappiness. Cat's gonna make a bunch of noise. That's cool. Um, so she had a few main points that I kind of wanted to talk about, and then I'll do like a quick update at the end about like what's making me happy right now. So in the book, Hecht kind of talks about three types of happiness: good day happiness, good life happiness, and euphoria. And she basically said we need to have a combination of those three kinds of happiness. And ideally, you want to have kind of working towards good life happiness overall, mixed in with some good day happiness, and then like some a sprinkling of euphoria, because euphoria is like pretty powerful, and like the effect that it will have on you will last much longer. Whereas good day happiness or good life happiness, you kind of need to like refresh a little bit more often. And I certainly think that that's actually been true in my life. Like the moments of like really incredible happiness, like they are something that you can return to and come back to as like being really meaningful. So those were sort of her 3 points. And what she pointed out is that they're sometimes in conflict with each other. You know, if you're having a good day of happiness, it might mean that you have the day off, or that you are like at the beach on vacation, or skipping school or skipping work. Those are, sometimes good days, but they don't necessarily lead to good life happiness, where you're working towards a long-term goal, or you're trying to improve yourself, or something like that. And at the same time, they're not necessarily euphoric happiness, which are sort of this like once in a lifetime kind of experiences, or experience caused by some kind of intoxication or some kind of circumstance that's like just really hard to recreate in sort of day to day life. So those are sort of her three kinds of happiness. Um, and she talked about sort of the ways that like in our current culture maybe we put different values on them, or we see them in different ways, that especially thinking about the ways that we like value happiness in different ways just changes things. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and it definitely made me think about like, am I going for what's sort of the balance in my life right now? Do I have enough good day happiness? Do I have enough good life happiness? Do I have enough euphoria? Then the other thing that, like, this is the thing that stuck with me the first time I read it, was she had sort of 4 main points that she was like, all philosophers, all religious people, like basically every kind of study of happiness thinks that these 4 things are really important. And the 4 things she had were: know yourself, control your desires, take what's yours, and remember death. Um, and some of them are kind of clearer than others. I think particularly the last one is like pretty clear in terms of like an instruction, but I think some of the other ones were not. Know yourself, I think, is pretty straightforward. Like, you have to kind of know who you are, what things mean to you, um, what's important to you, what you value, what you care about, also kind of where you come from, and those things too. Um, that's I think just like an important starting place. Controlling your desires. Kind of, she talked about stoicism and different things, different ideas around that. But more, she talked about sort of like we control our desires because that's what helps us balance between good day happiness and good life happiness, right? So, good life happiness sometimes means a lot of struggle and trying new things and failing and doing things you don't necessarily want to do, and it's the grind, right? Whereas good day happiness is like kind of easy and like fun and you enjoy it, and like we all enjoy kind of like, I don't know, watching a bunch of TV, or like uh, binge eating Oreos in my example, or vegan ice cream or whatever. So, kind of what's the balance there of your thing? And if you can control some of your desires in favor of, longer term goals or longer term desires, then you're improving your opportunities for happiness. I think the most confusing one for me is take what's yours. That's not one that was really obvious to me, but she kind of also said it's sort of about like seize the day, carpe diem, take what's yours. But I think it's also know your role, know where you are in your life, and be there in that point in your life, instead of trying to be somewhere else or wanting to be somewhere else. So the example she gives is a driver who lets other drivers go when it's her turn disrupts the rhythm of traffic. When your roles change from schoolgirl to bride, from new husband to father, from successful um, person to pitiable victim, it can be hard to adjust. And so you have to kind of know how to take on the roles that you have right now. And so I thought I think that that's an interesting and a difficult thing to remember. And I think particularly for me, I struggle with it sometimes of like, um, of wanting to be somewhere else, of wanting to be 2 weeks ahead or 2 years ahead in my life. Or like there was a moment I was doing this exercise earlier this week where you sort of imagine your ideal day, and I was thinking about that exercise a lot, and I was like, well, my ideal day, I'd be like 80 years old and I'd be through all of this part, and it's like, am I going to waste the next 30 years wishing that I was 60 or 80 or whatever, or am I going to like enjoy where I am right now at 30 and still figuring things out and living in New York and, all of those pieces. So I think that that's pretty critical, and something I would like to do better at, taking what's mine. And then the final one, remember death. Remember the end is coming. Like, this is sweet and bittersweet and challenging, and it's all we have. And there is joy in that. There is um, life in that knowledge, right? Like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not making any sense, and this video is dragging on. But I thought it was really a really critical reminder that we don't have forever, so make it count. Um, so those are kind of a few of the major points of the book, and kind of took you through sort of the first half or so. And then kind of along with that, she had some examples, through sort of a historical picture of like what does happiness look like, or how have people tried to achieve happiness at different points in your life. And some of the, like, she goes through a lot of the really common examples. So she talks about, she talks first about like drugs, like what is our attitude towards drugs? What has our attitude been towards drugs in past historical periods? So she talks about opium, and she talks about cocaine, and she also talks about our current happiness pills. She also talks about religion in here, and was religion like the cause of like a drug trip? I don't think she thinks so, but I don't remember exactly. But she also talks about sort of like what is our current attitude towards drugs, and like which drugs are acceptable and which drugs aren't. And as I've said before, I'm on antidepressants right now. I'm on drugs right now, and they're making a big difference. Like, I feel a lot better. I think we've gotten the dosage about right for now, so I'm pretty happy with like where I am, and I feel like I've made a lot of progress over the last month with that. So I'm really glad. But one of the things she pointed out was like we accept drugs to be like antidepressants, like not sad drugs, but we don't like happy drugs, like drugs that make you too happy because then you'll be unproductive, and that's like un-American. So she makes some interesting points about like what does it mean in different periods. And she also talks about sort of how we've tried to be happy in the body, sort of through different fad diets or eating or things like that, and exercise, and ways we try to be happy, and ways we try to sort of like control our desires, but not necessarily in ways that make us happy. And sort of also pointing out that this idea of like being, a certain body type, or a certain like needing exercise in your life, like that's a very constructed like 21st century first world idea, and that like if you went to the medieval period or things like that, like they wouldn't have this idea that that was like that was the thing you needed. And in the early 20th century, it was something that they thought was negative and would like decrease your body's um, vitality or something like that, because you'd be wasting all your energy. So just kind of thinking about, okay, what do we believe right now? What did they believe then? We think we know more, but do we really know more? And like, how much more are we going to know in 25 years or 50 years or 100 years? She talks about money and the ways that money can both make us happy and make us unhappy and things like that. And so I don't have a lot to say there, but it was good. It was good sections. And then she talked about kind of the ways that we come together. So she gave examples of Greek festival and medieval carnival, and that these were ways that we brought our communities together and told stories and let loose, and kind of were topsy turvy and changed things around, and what that meant for the community. And and kind of ended with sort of like, here's some, do that. Like when you have the opportunity to participate in a large public event, like participate in it, like take it in the way that, because we don't have anything like that anymore. We don't sort of have Greek festivals anymore, not the same way, and we don't really have sort of these medieval carnivals in the same way. So, when you show up for a sporting event, or you show up for a parade, or you show up for something like that, you're participating in this thing, and like you may get something out of it, or at least try it. So her kind of encouraging final message was sort of try different ways of being happy. Don't assume that the ways that we've sort of been taught this will make us happy, having this much money, having this kind of job, having like this kind of vacation, whatever. Try things, and don't necessarily assume that things that we're told are bad will make us unhappy, right? Like people have found happiness in many different ways over the course of history, and we shouldn't assume that the ways we're trying to find happiness right now are the only ways that are out there. So anyway, that's a little semi-quick summary. It's like a 12-minute summary. I really enjoyed it. I would really recommend it. It should be readily available in your libraries because it's 10 years old. I bought my copy on Amazon because I've been thinking about it since the last time I read it. Like I literally was trying to remember what those 4 things are. And so I'm really glad to have a copy, but you can definitely get it at your library. And I'd recommend that too, because libraries make me happy. So because my cat really wants to be let out of the room, I will wrap up and say the few things that have been making me happy right now. I had a really good week at work. Work is very busy. It's always very busy. I will always say that about work, but it's been really satisfying the last few days. There are some really cool projects that we're taking on. I'm really excited. I feel like things are moving. It's a lot of work in the next year or so, and I'm a little scared of like how am I going to balance work that I find satisfying, but also sometimes overwhelming, with some of the other things I want out of my life, like creative pursuits, like this project, like just sort of feeling at ease. So I'm not sure how I'll figure that out, but I am aware that like it's there, and just because I really like work doesn't mean it's the only thing that I like. So I'm trying to find that balance. I have some friends coming to visit this next week, so I'm excited to see them, and we have some fun times planned in New York, and it should be really good. Should be a lot of good day happiness, which will be nice. As a result, I also have a house full of food. I did like so much grocery shopping today, and so everything is like full of food, and I started making things, and I'm just like, that makes me really happy. Like to have that sort of abundance of food is good. And I think one of the other things is I've had a couple of friends who've had some health issues recently, or things like that, or their pets have actually. And so I'm really glad that we're all healthy, and particularly that HK is healthy, even though she's in the background making obnoxious noises. She's doing very well, and that's great. This weekend I also spent a lot of time like kind of enjoying media culture. So a few things that I've been enjoying this weekend are the podcasts Call Your Girlfriend, which is just excellent, and the podcast Two Dope Queens, which is also excellent, and I heard is being canceled, unfortunately, so definitely catch up before it ends, and definitely check out Phoebe and Jessica's HBO specials when they come back, because they are amazing. I've also been watching The Great British Bake Off, which is so fun and so satisfying, and we just got all caught up with The Good Place, and that's also a great show, and also like a show that's really about kind of like happiness and how to live like a good and happy life. So it's been good timing. So that's what I've got. I'm gonna go finish making dinner, and I'll talk to you guys probably next Sunday. Maybe I'll check in during the week. Who knows? But until then, have a good one. Bye.